Uh, my name is Shantel Valarie Onyango. I work for the Cradle, the Children's Foundation. I am a legal officer leading in a program on legislative governance and policy where we do a lot of legislative and policy advocacy work.
Yeah. And when it comes to sexual reproductive, sexual gender-based violence policies here in Kenya, yeah, we know there are a lot of portals that are available in the implementation of these policies. Yeah, what are some of those portals, and what is this conference going to address in terms of those portals?
Well, for me, I feel that we have quite a strong policy framework. I think where we are lacking is the budgetary allocations towards achieving what has been set out in the policy. So, in terms of the action plan to end gender based violence or sexual gender based violence, there is a very good policies. There has been one which is currently being formulated by the Attorney General's office, which we have been a part in formulating, and we're looking forward to seeing that come into fruition. But aside from that, I think we really need to just look into what the Treasury is and the Cabinet Secretaries are doing in terms of budgetary allocations, and also what Parliament is, is actually allocating towards sexual and gender-based violence.
You have said that the policies are strong, yeah? The difference comes in when it comes in terms of now the treasury and money implementation, yeah? But we see that a lot of sexual gender-based violence take a really long time to be determined, yeah, by the judges, yeah? Why do you think this is so?
Well, there is an extreme case of backlog. I think we're not prioritizing in the way that we should these cases, and we really need to look into that in terms of, is it a possibility that we create courts which are specifically tailored to listen to sexual and gender-based violence? Could that be a possible solution? And is that something that we need to address through legislation?
Yes, when it comes to even youngsters, yeah, we see that a lot of youngsters find themselves they are out of school, yeah, because of these cases. Now the long-term policies and all that terms, yeah. What are you doing to ensure that now when it comes to children, the policies are much more faster so that they can get back to class and come back to their mental fresh state where they can be able to engage and interact with other kids?
Well, I think that it comes down to the psychosocial aspects, where you need to really, after such a horrifying ordeal as rape or defilement, or any form of sexual and gender-based violence, you need the child to really come to an understanding of what happened to them and be able to deal with it psychologically. So I think it's a psychological problem that we have in just distributing counselors to really come in and speak to these children. So this is something that we can do even institutionally as schools, have counselors who are specifically trained to deal with this type of violence.
And we see that there are very few counselors in schools. There are very, very, very few. You rarely find even in primary schools, yeah? You understand that there are very few counselors, yeah? Is there a plan to be able to bring counselors into schools and be able to, now to be able to talk to these kids and be able to explain to these kids what has happened to their maybe a fellow kid in their surroundings?
Well, I think that schools are doing fairly well in terms of having counselors within their institutions. It is now a matter of, are those counselors trained to specifically deal with these issues? I think that's a very low-lying fruit that we can take advantage of, instead of having counselors from outside of the institutions, and children have to go far and wide to look for counseling, and it's often very expensive. Why don't we just train these counselors to be specifically dealing with these cases? And not just that, but training students to identify when they're actually being abused. And that would really help in terms of reducing even the number of cases that we have.
Yeah, you have said that it's going to reduce, yeah. But now we have less people who are police, who are psychologists who will be able to talk to these kids about now sexual gender-based violence, yeah. But it is not included in the curriculum. Is this something would recommend that now sexual gender-based violence be included in the curriculum?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that that is one of the things that we've been trying to push for as an organization, as a Cradle, is to have a mandated responsibility by our education systems to actually train these students on what SGBV is, what to look out for, and so on and so forth. But it is high time that we sort of stop leaving these issues to parents and discuss these issues within our institutions, because parents aren't doing this work of training their children on what to do, and sometimes they're even the perpetrators. So if a child already has some idea that I might be being abused even by my parent, then it would be possible for this child to go and report this, and especially that goes hand in hand in creating more accessible reporting mechanisms for children, because you remember that children are often very young when these things happen, and they do not have that level of independence to go to the police stations and report this, go to hospitals and have themselves checked out when this happens, and so on. So it's about making these systems more accessible to children, so that we have, an easier way that even a 5-year-old is able to report when something like this happens.
But you want to go as far as including SGBV in schools, yeah? But even sexual education right now is a challenge implementing in schools, yeah? What are your hopes? What are your hopes now, even if now sexual education is not yet in school? Now you want to go as far as sexual gender-based violence. How far are we to achieving this?
Well, there's currently a bill in Parliament. It's called the Family Reproductive Health Bill. And one of the provisions that we've really tried to push for is having comprehensive sex educations within school curricula, and have this something that is not only mandated, but it's something that is examinable in the same way we examine math, science, English, and so on. We can have this subject to be something that is examinable, so that even teachers prioritize this, because as it currently is, teachers will come in and teach children about reproductive health and all these other things, but as a by the way, and with no mechanisms put in terms of what they can and cannot teach children, and what is respectable, or what is expected for them at that particular age. So we want this education to be very age appropriate and to be tailored in a manner that is for children. And we have really tried to speak to the religious communities and the religious leaders about this issue, because they currently have the biggest problems with comprehensive sex education, just because they feel that when we introduce such a curriculum, there is a possibility that children are going to be sexualized and taught about sex early, which is actually not our intention. Our intention is that there's no early sexual debut for children, because right now we have so many cases of teenage pregnancies, and we want to teach them that in fact you should be abstaining. In fact, this is what could possibly happen if you do not abstain, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, you've talked about this subject big 20 schools, yeah, and you have also talked that about now kids now not being aware of the sexual gender-based violence, and majority of them being perpetrated by the parents, yeah. Now it comes to the challenge of them reporting. Now they come to the challenge of now reporting and be able to describe this particular incident to the judge, yeah. How are you doing to ensure now there is a smooth transition, and what challenges do you face when now a kid is perpetrated and it comes now to explaining to the judge or in front of the court?
Well, for us as a Cradle, we have counselors who actually counsel children prior to the court process. And what that does is it just prepares a child for what to expect in the court system, so that they are not traumatized or shocked by even seeing their perpetrators. Sometimes it still happens. They're not traumatized by the questions that they're going to be asked. So it's just about that legal preparations in terms of what should be asked, how to respond, and just not to be intimidated. Yeah.
Do you have a challenge when it comes to now terminologies? Because now sex education is not that much implemented in school. Yeah, we still in the era where now like the private parts are even expressed as susus. You know, how is this challenge being solved and coming through for being solved in the courts?
Well, as we always just try to insist that parents and teachers and so on just use the name of their private parts. If it's a penis, just say a penis. When we use words like dudu and susu, you are actually causing it's almost a cause for embarrassment for that child. But when you begin to call something the way it is, it's just become such a normal body part in the same way any other body part is. So we also have trained judges in the past and prosecutors as well and defense lawyers to actually examine these children, question these children in a way that is age appropriate to them. For children who haven't really been, educated on the proper terminologies, then we just ask that, the prosecutor would elaborate on what exactly they mean by a penis or a vagina, so that the child is aware of what is being spoken about.
Now that's now in terms of children. When people grow up now, they experience now sexual gender-based violence in different ways, and in this time and era we experience it through online. Yeah, are you in the online space? Are you trying to now to change the online space and sexual gender-based violence in terms of the online space? How are you trying to solve now that issue and now incorporate it into the judge into the judicial system?
Okay, that's a really great question because we currently have drafted an amendment bill to the Sexual Offences Act. We've also drafted an amendment bill to the Cybersecurities Act, which is speaking on issues concerning image-based violence. And what we're saying is that yes, the Cybersecurities Act does speak about it in some form, but the legislative provisions that currently exist are very, very minimal and do not address things such as, the need to actually delete these images as soon as possible. That every circulation of that image, for instance, if you're in a WhatsApp group and these images are being circulated, that you have a legal duty to actually delete these images and not circulate them further, which would make you a perpetrator as well, aside from the initial perpetrator. So we are just addressing these issues through legislation, and we hope that we are going to be able to introduce this bill come the 16 days of activism to Parliament. These are just very contemporary issues that are emerging in terms of the Sexual Offences Act, which in 2006 we didn't have to deal with things like this. But we are now realizing that there is a contemporary problem surrounding image-based sexual abuse, and this is something that we are trying to deal with through the amendment bill.
Have you collaborated with these social media platforms to ensure that this comes into place?
No, we haven't. But I think that this goes beyond even legislation, as I'm talking about the Sexual Offences Amendment Bill. But perhaps it's even a matter of the best intervention possibly could be to create a convention, a treaty, which all countries sign in regards to this problem. Because even if we address the issue in Kenya, but Facebook and Instagram and all these other different social media platforms are international or are not necessarily Kenyan, then we haven't truly dealt with the problem. We would need a space where Instagram immediately something like that is posted, or TikTok, whatever, then they have a legal obligation. So that needs even an intervention internationally wise, regionally wise, to deal with that. And I think the best way to address that issue is perhaps thinking about even creating a convention or a treaty between countries that this is something that we're going to deal with.
You're saying that they're not legally mandated for that, but we see that now, like Kenya is where now major social media platforms have set up regulatory offices. Yeah, like Facebook, they usually have an office here. We have TikTok, where the president was saying they want to come here. Does it now? You're not involving now the social media platforms, whereas some of their main offices are situated in East Africa, and you're saying that it's not part of their problem.
Yeah, I think that some of the social media platforms have tried to deal with this issue, but again, it just comes down to our lawmakers speaking very strongly about this, and having this, addressed within our own national borders. From there, we can now begin to deal with it in an international platform. But again, our president, our cabinet secretaries have a responsibility to reach out to these social media platforms and tell them that you need to, in order for you to operate in our country, then you need to put in special, platforms or special regulations so that we do not have such offenses occurring within our country.
I can hear you trying, yeah? You're saying that we are trying to do this policy, we are trying to do this, we're trying to collaborate with the government. But I don't hear like you have tried maybe associate your partnership with those people who are undergoing this cyberbullying, yeah? Because a lot of them are influencers, yeah? A lot of people are maybe our own family members, yeah? And some of them do not know even they are going through the sexual gender-based violence, yeah? How are you doing trying to do that to do so that we can make sure that they are also included, those sexual gender-based survivors and those victims are also engaged in this policy?
Okay, we do have an awareness program, and our awareness program just generally deals with the public, people who are vulnerable, especially, to just create awareness that, in fact, when this happens, it is not your fault. You can actually take this to the police. You can institute both criminal and civil proceedings against this person and any other person who is circulating those images. So those are things that we try to create awareness to the public. But again, we are a nonprofit organization, and this is actually a responsibility for government, and they should be mandated by law to actually do this awareness, and then even spread that awareness even to our police and our prosecutions, because again, with image sexual gender-based violence, you'll usually have the police officers and the prosecutions blaming the victim. Why did you send those pictures in the first place? When in fact they had some expectation that these images were to be kept private. And it was, in the same way when you're having sexual intercourse in the ordinary setting, you don't expect that your sexual partner is going to open the window and let other people see what you're doing. You expect it to be private. And it's the same situation even in the online space. And that's something that we try to educate police officers, judges, prosecutors, magistrates, to enable them to know that actually this is the victim, and irrespective of her sexual needs and wants at that time, she deserves some legal repatriations.
Your final words, your parting shot. What do you aim to achieve with this conference? What are your hopes after this? What is going to change?
Well, I am very happy by the speeches and the panel discussions we've had thus far. They have been very informative. For me, coming to this conference, I really just wanted to gather information that I didn't previously have. I have mentioned that we have drafted a sexual offences amendments bill, which will be going to Parliament hopefully in next month. And I just wanted to kind of see, like, what are my colleagues saying in terms of their experiences, whether those are lived experiences and they're survivors, or within their professional fields. What are some of the gaps that we have in law that we can take care of? And I've gotten quite a lot of information that wasn't even there previously on the bill. So we hope to even amend that to include the information that I have received today.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.